The Nishika N8000 is a 35mm quadra lens 3D camera that originally sold in 1989 for $200 US. 30 years ago, when you wanted to buy one of these, you wouldn't be able to find one at a shop. In fact, the only way, or one of the only ways to get one, was to hear a knock at your door. That's right, these things were sold door to door. The company that produced this camera did everything they could to make the N8000 seem like the next stage of evolution in regards to photography. Even though it's a fairly unique concept, it was far from a refined product. Hi everyone, Azrael Knight here, and in this video I'm giving you my first impressions on the Nishika N8000. A few years ago, I came across the N8000 while at a flea market, and it came with a box and some extra materials like the warranty and the mail-in envelopes. Unfortunately, it was not operational, and I put it up on eBay, but no one wanted it either. Sometimes broken cameras sell, but not in this case. Fast forward to a year or so ago, and I find out these cameras are trending for an ungodly amount of money, broken or not, for what is essentially a plastic toy. So I keep my eyes peeled, and a few weeks ago I get an email from an old friend who is downsizing and wants to know if I want some of his old cameras, including this one. Of course I couldn't say no. Neil, thanks so much for the generous donation. You've definitely provided some content here. So what the heck is this thing and what does it do? Well, back in the day, this was being promoted as a 3D camera that used regular old 35mm film. It accomplished this by taking 4 photos at the same time with 4 separate lenses. You mail in your film and get these cool lenticular 3D prints. The effect doesn't translate well on video, and this example has degraded from the tape holding it to the base of this promotional piece, and many on eBay look the same way. I'd love to dive into the history of what happened in a future video, and let me know in the comments if you want to see that, but the short version is this thing was a giant dumpster fire. The company went under and everyone forgot all about these until a few years ago when it tickled someone's nostalgic funny bone, and seemingly overnight, these things are about $500 a piece now. You may be asking how we are supposed to see these 3D images now that we can't mail away for the special lenticular prints. The answer is by photoshopping them into GIFs. There is a great, easy-to-follow tutorial by Edward Pavez I'll link in the description, but basically you scan your 4 images, chop them into individual pieces, align them and convert into a GIF using Timeline in Photoshop. There are other ways, but I have found Eduardo's the most straightforward. Taking nifty photos is a simple matter of making sure that something is in the foreground and background. Being animated and tossing stuff into the air adds that dimensional effect. It's like an itty-bitty matrix maker. So is this thing as fun as it looks? Absolutely. Is it worth the money? Not even close. Just like those Olympus point-and-shoot cameras, it's a fad. Don't get me wrong, it's a super neat camera. It's just not car payment neat. Everything about the look of this thing is designed to make you think you are getting more camera than you actually are. The pentaprism-like housing at the top? Empty. The LCD panel? Fake. The grip makes it seem like there's a motor drive. They even added a metal weight at the bottom so it feels legit. Also, 2 of these 3 hot shoe contacts? Also fake. Nonetheless, the N8000 is the accumulation of 100 patents, and the results are pretty cool. I had to think really outside the box when using one, and I was admittedly a little giddy when I saw that my negatives turned out. If you've bought one of these or are determined to own one, I'm going to give you my personal pros and cons, as well as some tips, but first, here are a few shots I took with my N8000, and please keep in mind I had no idea if this thing was going to work, so I just shot some really random stuff to test it. You'll see. Okay, I hope you were entertained by those. I actually had a great time making them. Let's talk about some pros and cons. First, the pros. This might be obvious, maybe not, but man, this is a fun camera. It's pretty easy to see how things are going to end up once you look at a few examples online, and it definitely gets the creative juices flowing. Despite the nature of some of these so-called features on this camera, it does have a spot for the cable release. And now the cons. There are a whole bunch of limitations to this camera, but rather than picking them one by one, I will try and group them together. First are the lenses at a fixed focal length of 30mm with a minimum focusing distance of 6 feet and a maximum aperture of f8. Of course, we need to acknowledge this totally fake LCD panel at the top, which is just a best practices chart for distancing from your subject, and everything else I mentioned before, like the metal plate at the bottom, and even this sticker imitating the Japan Camera Industry Institute stickers. The biggest one for me was how time-consuming it was scanning the negatives, then cropping and stacking them in Photoshop to convert to a GIF. They are slightly too big to cut into sections of 3, especially since spacing is inconsistent, so you're going to need 2 pages to sleeve your negatives. Lastly, you will be limited to portrait-oriented photos. I do have some tips for you in case you already have one or are determined to own one. Tip number 1 is make sure you buy one with a money-back guarantee. Easiest way to do that is through eBay or at least PayPal. Tip number 2 is the apertures represented by these pictograms here translate to f8, f11, and f19, and the shutter speed is 1/60. Tip number 3 is use the film speed to plan ahead. Don't load the camera if you can help it until you know the conditions. Tip number 4 is bring a light meter and chase the light you need for a proper exposure. I have this Vivitar 285 HV, and at 6 feet on a quarter power, I get just about the perfect exposure I need. I'd recommend finding a flash and using your meter to figure out what power you need. Any flash should work. And those are my tips. I hope it makes you more prepared to decide to take the leap or save your money. Keep an eye out for them though, as more of them are being used, more will break, and the price will probably go up until we all move on to the next relic. That's all for now. I really hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, perhaps you'll consider becoming my patron on Patreon. You can also follow me on Instagram and Twitter. And until next time, stay classic.